Greetings, fanboys and fangirls. Jared here with another review from Fanboys Forever. Today I have the absolute pleasure of finally bringing us a look at the G.I. Joe Classified series Sergeant Slaughter figure. So, anybody who's watched the channel for a while knows that I am a huge Sergeant Slaughter fan. One of the very few celebrities that I've actually went to the trouble to actually go and meet, and it was great, by the way. And Sergeant Slaughter, if you're not aware, is a very, very famous WWF/WWE, whatever you want to go with, a wrestling personality from the 80s and 90s and today. And he got folded into the G.I. Joe line back in the 80s. And because of that, he started to kind of attain this legendary status as a real-life, living and breathing G.I. Joe. And of course, his persona as Sergeant Slaughter in the ring was a perfect match for the G.I. Joe brand. So for years, people have been wondering, will Hasbro ever be able to strike up another deal to make a Sergeant Slaughter figure? And the whole point is that it's been difficult to do this because of the way the rights are, with WWE and Mattel pretty much being the main rights holder. And for years, there's been other companies that have attempted to fill in the gap in the 6-inch space. We've had, of course, the Valaverse line, which I've done a review on. And of course, we've had Mattel's own offerings, which were more in, say, like the 7-inch scale, like this one. Heck, we even saw Mattel fold him into the Masters of the Universe line in a way. But no matter what, there was always that part of me that just thought these are all approximations. And so it was always a little depressing to see these companies kind of beat around the bush when we all know what they were really wanting to be able to do. But we finally have it right here. And before I begin and actually review the figure, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Of course, I do a lot of Sergeant Slaughter related content. We do G.I. Joe content here, and of course, lots of Masters of the Universe. And of course, be sure to like the video because that really helps the algorithm do its weird thing that it does. And of course, comment down below after the review and let me know what you thought about the figure. And with all that out of the way, let's begin. So we first have to look at this box. It kind of saddens me that it's not a traditional box, that they didn't quite get there in time with this figure before they could kind of, I guess, beat Hasbro to doing away with all the plastic on the front of the packages, because it's so nice to be able to see the figure, of course, before you buy it. That's a big deal. But I will say that if they had to do it like this, man, this is nice. Like, I gotta say, this is really cool. It's so great to see this kind of airbrushed looking, more traditional, real American hero illustration of Sergeant Slaughter up there, and in such a great pose. And on the sides, you can see that they've done some really interesting things with the artwork. Comic book style, animation style, toy commercial style, WWE style, and then an actual shot of the product that you'll get, which doesn't actually look quite as good as the real figure because I've already opened this. That's one good thing about this, is this packaging is super collector friendly because, you know, it's just a box and you just put it back together. You can see that we have a little bit about his stats and what all he comes with, and he does come with so many cool accessories. And on the side, we get this lovely, lovely artwork, and you can see Sarge's gigantic chin, defying nature, as it were, and at the top he is number 53, and here is the UPC code. And in case you're curious, all of his accessories come in a little paper locker, which is now how they're doing it with G.I. Joe Classified. You just open it up and you'll find the accessories inside. I managed to rip mine a little bit, so be careful. All right, let's look at the figure. And here he is, that never-ending dynamo of patriotism himself, Sergeant Slaughter, aka Bob Remus. We've got so many things to talk about. I will say, first impressions are very, very good. It is exactly what you would hope it would be. It is that classic Sergeant Slaughter silhouette. It is that classic Sergeant Slaughter stature, and the look is just there. It's so interesting to finally see a Sergeant Slaughter figure embrace the fantasy element of Slaughter, because I've been so used to going over figures that were just based on reality. And, you know, reality is great, but I think we can all agree it's overrated. So it's great to have more of the fantasy version of Sarge with cartoon proportions and physique, this more kind of animation, Sunbow, Deke, whatever you want to say, kind of Sergeant Slaughter. So let's just get right into it by talking about some of the detail on the figure. This is a fun segment always because we kind of get to inspect the figure and see what it's all about. Of course, looking at Sarge's physique, they really did a good job of not overdoing it, which I think was always what I was concerned about. I think that you can go so far with Sergeant Slaughter to a point to where you can kind of make him look a little ridiculous. And this keeps him legitimate while also making him like insanely ripped. And I think that this is really a good compromise so that he doesn't look ridiculous with other G.I. Joe classified figures. With his arms and things, it's similar to, say, a Gung Ho or something like that. But I think that the waist is a little more trim. So it has the good effect of giving him this kind of V shape to where he's more kind of, I guess, stereotypically cartoon buff. So I think it's a cool effect. You can see he's got the bands along his wrist. He has his baton right here. And down here, of course, we have the camo pants. I feel that this is maybe the weaker point of the figure because down here on the actual straps and laces of the boots, you would almost think that that needed to be black back through there, or at least have some kind of added paint detail. So I do feel that that could have been improved. Interesting touch that Sarge does have, you know, the knee pads. Once again, I feel like that could be improved with a little bit of paint. It wouldn't surprise me if I go in and I do a black wash over these laces, just because it has this kind of unpainted look. It just kind of looks like plastic because it is, and I think that that could be improved a little bit. Camo also probably needed a little help to stand out. Probably the brown they selected wasn't quite as dark as it should have been, and it leads to kind of mixing in slightly with that green. And if you look at the hat, that's probably more along the lines of what I would have done, just so that it would stand out. But it's not really too big of a deal. Most of the paint hits are really pretty good on this figure. That's kind of a nightmare for me now that they're doing the blind boxes. Of course, it doesn't matter because, you know, I've got to order them online anyway. But still, I think that most of the paint is very straight on this. I think the one place where it kind of messes up is back here where it's a little off track on the belt. Not a big deal. Maybe it's slightly over to the side a little on the badge, on the hat. So other than that, I mean, I think we're in good shape. I do appreciate that he comes with the whistle. It is gold, which I think is a nice touch. And it's sculpted to just lay really, I would say, perfectly right here around the neck. It doesn't look weird. I've seen Sergeant Slaughter figures that have a whistle that kind of, you know, you lay it on there and it's like this. But this doesn't look like it's defying gravity. They were very careful about that, so I do appreciate it. Moving up to the hat and the glasses, what can I say? I think that they've really nailed Sarge here. And less, you know, trying to lean on the real guy as they are, I think, looking and making sure that they're hitting things about the original toy and especially the animation and the comic art. And for your G.I. Joes, I think that that's what you want. You want a certain kind of fantasy. They've done a great job with his scowl, especially with some of the paint hits that they have in there. You can actually see that they've printed on like a little bit of a kind of a dark highlight there right under his bottom lip that separates his chin. And it does a lot to give him some extra depth. I think there's even a little bit of paint printing on the nose to give that a little bit more depth. I feel like their minimal use of that printing technology was good here. It actually worked out. Moving around to the back, the hat looks great as well, and you can see Sarge's hair. And speaking of hair, we will take the hat off. And there we go. Sarge now probably has more hair than he's had for 40 years. This is recognizable as actual Sergeant Slaughter, the guy. But at the same time, the fantasy is there. You know, Sergeant Slaughter in the cartoon, he has a full head of hair. We'll put it like that. Sergeant Slaughter in real life, that's not so much of a thing. You can see where, you know, there's been other versions that have more accurately captured what the situation is there. But I do like that they stuck to, like I keep saying, the fantasy version of Sergeant Slaughter. And I think that it looks really great. The eyes are right on. No complaints about tampergraph placement or print placement. The eyebrows are right on. You don't see Sarge a whole lot like this in cartoons and comics and G.I. Joe, but it is great that they went to the trouble of making sure that he looked good. Now, a big question that we always have with Sergeant Slaughter figures is, what is the solution for the glasses? They have a pretty good one here, and it was simply just by having it be a fairly hard plastic. We've had some that were very flexible, but they've just made sure that the ears come out enough to have kind of a base for the sides of the glasses to just hang off of something. And without the hat even, I think Sarge looks pretty good. Now, if you kind of jostle him around, it still stays on. And I think that's all you could ask for with glasses that are literally just setting on a figure's head. Now, if you turn them upside down, oh, well, okay. Kudos to them. I thought that it was going to come right off. It didn't. Okay, well, wow. That's great. That's great. Okay. Can I get these things to come off without actually physically taking them off? Well, what do you know? You have to literally take the glasses off to make them come off. So congratulations to Hasbro. Now, when you put the hat on there, that can kind of press on them. But as long as you keep a little degree of separation, you're fine. And it looks fantastic. All right, so let's talk about articulation. And for this, I will be taking off the accessories right there. The whistle, of course, is removable. And it is a hard plastic, believe it or not. You have a hinge up here at the neck. And I think that that hinge can do quite a bit, really. I think he can look up farther than me, and by extension, probably farther than the real Sergeant Slaughter. You can get quite a look down. He basically is only stopped by his chest, which is crazy. So I think that's fantastic. You can see that the neck is a separate piece in there. You can turn the neck or you can turn the head. Of course, the head is going to be more apt to turn. There's a little bit of tilt side to side, just enough to get those kind of, you know, to the side expressions like that when he's chewing somebody out. The shoulders, there's kind of a butterfly motion right here. You can see it working in there. There is a little bit of color discrepancy because, of course, this has to be black plastic right here because the tank top is black plastic and this is painted flesh. Now, it shows up quite a bit on camera, more than it does in real life, but you can see the difference in the flesh tones right there. So don't worry, that's not really noticeable. You can see the shoulder hinges are really great because you can go over 90 degrees, which is nice. I think that's a very realistic range of motion, and it gets close enough to kind of hugging the sides right there. That's as far down as it goes. You can see there is a cut up there. There is a double joint at the elbow. You can see that there's a hinge at the hand. It does rotate, and I think overall the arm articulation is fantastic. Look at this diaphragm. You can do so much with this, and of course this isn't anything necessarily new for classified, but I just appreciate how they really allow you to do just about whatever a human person could do in the most extreme cases in terms of diaphragm articulation. Sometimes these are kind of loose in classified, and so I'm glad this wasn't. There is a little bit of tilt down there at the waist. This is one way that I really appreciate that the classified team always makes sure that the articulation almost mirrors the O-ring articulation from those old figures. So it's something you really grow to appreciate. Of course, you can turn side to side. But speaking of extra articulation, down here, I always appreciate that the G.I. Joe classified team has dropped down hips. So even though it's not a whole lot, it makes a big difference because if you have the hip up like this, then this is, you know, the most realistic kind of high kick you can do. But if you bring the hip down like this, you can start getting crazier, like ballerina level of flexibility. So I do appreciate that. You can see that we have a cut right here at the thigh. You can see that we have a double joint. We have a cut at the boot, and there is plenty of rotation. And these might be a little loose down here, but it's nothing horrible. He can flat foot the most extreme, like wide stances, so that's not anything you have to worry about. That was on the first try, so just putting it out there. So I've considered doing a separate video about this, but there is an element to G.I. Joe classified construction that I really don't like. That is what I refer to as the G.I. Joe classified kill switch. And when I say kill switch, I mean that I've had several figures break at one weak point. And that is down here at what they do for the articulation at the hips. But there's basically a very slender amount of plastic that holds the kind of dumbbells in the middle. And it's kind of blocked by the crotch piece there. But the problem is that as you turn this for the first time, you will have trouble, because I think that the actual dumbbells in there holding the legs has almost little protrusions on it, or little bits of texture on it, that makes it difficult to turn these. You know what I'm talking about with classified. If you've ever handled one, it kind of does this thing where it goes like lock, 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 like that. You hear that click, lock, lock, lock. And if you don't have the figure at the correct temperature, like when you first handle it, and of course, you know, I think we all know by now you're supposed to put your figures in some kind of warm water or hot water before you handle them for the first time, then you're going to have trouble and it's just going to snap. I had that happen recently with a retro destro from Walmart. So it's very unfortunate, but I am happy to report that after you handle Sarge just for a little bit, you can hear that that snapping has already gone away over here. And honestly, you just have to wear out some of those little texture points in the dumbbell, and you can see one of them peeking out right there. And once they kind of wear with friction, see, the clicking is already starting to go away over here. So that's unfortunate that they keep doing it like that. What they need to do is buff up the connection in here. So classified team, if you're listening, you've got to change the construction of your hips. I've had alley vipers break like that. Bats were about to break like that, and I've had to grab some heat. I've had 2 storm shadows from your Snake Eyes movie line, which, you know, RIP Snake Eyes movie, horrible. But I mean, it's a big problem, so you need to fix it. But thankfully, he's okay. Let's talk about accessories a little bit. He, of course, comes with his hat, and I love the detail on this. Looks fantastic, and here is the inner part of the hat. It fits very tightly too. It even has the back strap right there. Of course, he has the whistle that we talked about earlier, and it's very well detailed to be so small. And there's been some companies that have done Sergeant Slaughter where this is way too thick and it looks weird. Thankfully, this is just, I think, the right width. Of course, he's got his sunglasses that we looked at earlier with the silver. I do appreciate that they are silver and not black. And it's funny because on the other side, they're just brown plastic, so Sarge ain't seen a thing. Over here, we have Sarge's baton. I've always wondered, like, what's Sarge going to do with this thing? Does he, like, beat people that he's training who aren't doing enough setups? I don't know. And, of course, Sarge's, what is this? We're going to say it's a AK-47. I don't know. I don't know anything about guns. But this is a terrific gun. I don't know if we've seen this exact same one in classified before. I'm not that guy. You can see that we have a clip. I'm going to say it's a clip. I don't know. And then over here we have a scope, and it's removable as well. It just fits right in. It fits pretty tightly too, so that's a nice touch. And it's really beautifully detailed. They definitely are abandoning that sci-fi look for guns that they used to do. This, I don't know if this is a real gun. This might be, you know, again, another like Nerf kind of gun that they've recolored. I don't know. And a whole bevy of alternate hand options. You've got pointing fingers for both hands that you already saw earlier. You have grabbing hands for both. I really like the grappling hands because Sarge would often do this in the cartoon. You'd see him go into this stance when he was fighting. And of course, my dude is going to have 2 fists. So he's loaded down with accessories, but what if I told you that he comes with this? Holy crap. This is so cool. You can see that they have used that artwork that I kind of thought they were trying to go in that Real American Hero kind of painted artwork direction. And they have him right there on this like fake Real American Hero kind of card. You can see this little Sarge is in there, and there's no cross sell or anything in the back. That would have been, I think, asking for a little much. But this is collector friendly. That's right. This tiny little thing, which I just want to show you in scale, is as if he had his own 6-inch Sergeant Slaughter action figure. He might be a little bigger than 6-inch here, but it kind of gives that vibe. It's funny because I don't think they could quite make it small enough that it would be a 3 3/4 figure. So that's kind of funny. But this is collector friendly. Check it out. All I have to do is slide this out, just like a real collector friendly card, you know, where you have the plastic in the front and then you slide the cardboard out. So take that, no more plastic and packaging. Look at that, he hopped out, he was so excited. And here he is. It's Lil Sarge. Look at that. It's hard to see all the detail on him, especially in the face, where I think they've done a little bit of a paint hit that ended up, I think, hitting his nose just as much, like with the silver on the back. There he is. Doesn't quite, you know, it's amazing that they're able to even get it to look this good, because this little guy is barely, I think, an inch tall. So, I mean, that's incredible. And of course, it turns out that Sarge is the most narcissistic man on G.I. Joe. There's a lot of jokes you could make here. It brings me joy. So you just press him back into his bubble. You kind of have to open one of the flaps to get it to fit back in. And you could have him displayed like this if you wanted to. I have no idea why you wouldn't want to put the card in. And there's the card right back, just like you never took him out in the first place. So this is incredible. I love this. This is probably my new favorite classified accessory by far. Of course, you already saw Sarge with the baton earlier. I'll just briefly show you what it looks like for him to hold his gun. And here we go. So he can be like, blow that maggot away. This looks great. I love it. I think he looks fantastic with a weapon. It's a shame that he doesn't have like some kind of strap or something to hold it on his back that would be removable. I guess that would be fun. But other than that, I think that this is a really good look. Imagine Sarge getting in the ring with this baby. I have so many G.I. Joe classified figures that I could show you scale comparisons all day, but it's just a lot easier for me to just show you this one. Because, you know, you have the larger kind of G.I. Joe classified figure, you have the regular male kind of buck of G.I. Joe classified, and you have the female kind of size of classified. And you can see that all the heights line up really well. Sarge should be about half an inch bigger than probably your standard G.I. Joe over here. Of course, you know, he's going to be taller than a smaller kind of female buck like Scarlet there. And he's going to be pretty much eye to eye with Gung Ho, which is what I always expected them to do in terms of scale, and I'm glad they didn't deviate from that or anything. As a matter of fact, a lot of Sarge's pieces are simply reused from Gung Ho. You can see that you've got the arms are the same pretty much. You can see that like the piece there and the belt are the same. It's just repainted. The chest is just directly from here with the roadblock. You can kind of source most of the parts back to something. I do think it's disappointing, and this is one of my only artistic gripes about the figure, that all over the box art, you've got this design where Sarge is wearing the classic belt, right? Has the little join right there in the front. I mean, it's on every piece right here, so much so that you have to wonder, did they really, like, were they pushed into a corner with reusing that piece? I don't really understand why they would go to the trouble of making sure all the art had the kind of classic belt, and then they just end up repainting this and it looks very different. I don't really care, I'll be honest with you. That's not really my kind of thing. I think this looks just as good or better for him to have a regular gold belt buckle. But it sure is odd, isn't it? I mean, you almost have to believe that at some point the plan was for him to have his own unique sculpt right there. So I do think that there's a little bit of disappointment. In case you still don't know what I mean, I'm talking about Sarge's classic wrestling belt right there. And so you can see the Mattel figure had done that. All right, and it would be totally crazy for me not to go through my collection of Sergeant Slaughter figures in a similar scale and show you some comparisons. Of course, just for fun, for giggles, you might say, we're going to have Mattel's WW Eternia Sergeant Slaughter right here. I love this little guy. This is so good. I love that they did this. It's a real tribute not only to G.I. Joe and Sergeant Slaughter, but it's a tribute to He-Man as well. It may sound a little hyperbolic on my part, but this is probably the greatest intersection of my interest in the toy world that's ever been done. So, of course, I'm going to show you the Valorverse Sarge. This was the first Valorverse Sarge. There's been a second version since then. It's funny to see them side by side. As I always suspected, this was going to be the more realistic Sarge. Like if you had a real Sergeant Slaughter walk in and, you know, join your G.I. Joes, then that's what Sarge looks like. And it's a lot more accurate in terms of physique. You know, I think this might have a little bit better facial painting though. So I will point that out. Of course, in the Valorverse, you also have this Sergeant Slaughter. Once again, using that same base body that we saw on the last one. This one is a lot closer to Triple T, especially if I take all this stuff off, but I like this unique look for Slaughter with the hat and the gold rimmed glasses and the web gear. So I kind of like him being his own thing. But you know me, I'm not going to leave you hanging, and this is the comparison you probably want to see. I will say that there are things about the Valaverse version that are better. Look at the boots. I mean, that's the most obvious point. Hasbro did not cost out clearly on those boots. They didn't cost out on the belt. So it's a shame that that couldn't happen. However, though, I think proportionally, I'm not sure that this is as true to Sarge as it could be, the real man, or the animation. He's a little more wiry than he probably ought to be. And I think that's what really gives this guy the advantage. And his glasses are really difficult to keep on. You can see just leaning his head down a little bit, you're having lots of trouble. So this one, much better in terms of engineering on that front. And just for fun, I did do kind of my own custom version of Sergeant Slaughter and the Warthog tank. This was, you know, it's not supposed to be 100% accurate to the original. I did a whole video about it, but I think that they look good together. This is definitely a much better realistic Sergeant Slaughter head, I think, even though it's pretty old at this point. But it is funny because I think I was able to get the scale just about right with the funny things I did to turn it into classified scale, and you can watch the video to see that. I think the previous champion of Sergeant Slaughter figures was this guy. He is the Mattel Ultimates version, release, whatever you want to say, the exclusive. He probably still has better articulation than this guy. Particularly, you can see the butterflies here are so much more extreme and you just get more out of it. I also really like the variety of heads and accessories with this guy, but there are things that the Hasbro version trumps him out on. Particularly if you need it to go with your classified figures, then the scale is so much better here. But also, I think that the hat turned out kind of funny on this version. You can see that it kind of got warped or something, and I could fix it with hot water and all of that. For me, this is more like the G.I. Joe version. This is more of your standard wrestling kind of Sergeant Slaughter. In the end, I have to say, this is just a great release. I am so happy with how this turned out. It was such a treat to even have it be revealed that they were going to do an official Sergeant Slaughter figure. There had been rumors, there had been rumblings that maybe Sarge's people had reached some kind of deal with Hasbro, and this is just a special release. I really didn't think that we would end up getting an official version, but here it is, and I'm so happy that it happened because there's just certain things that you have to hit about this version of Sergeant Slaughter, and I think they did that. They've done a great job overall with the figure, and I think he looks great, and he's going to be an incredible addition to your G.I. Joe classified collection. The only thing that I can hope for is that Hasbro will be allowed to continually use Sergeant Slaughter in the future for classified. I think we would all love to see a Triple T tank. We would love to see Sarge in the USA shirt. We would love to see Sarge in the Warthog vest and getup. I think that there's so many options. We would love to see Slaughter's Marauders version of Sergeant Slaughter. And of course, why shouldn't they do that? Because we're already getting some of the colorways for that particular team in other figures. So there's just a lot of options here. There are a lot of possibilities, and I'm excited about the future for Sergeant Slaughter and classified. Here's hoping it's not a one-off. You know, even with some of the reuse that we saw in this figure that may have compromised some of their original plan regarding the actual wrestling belt, and even if they still use the terrifying kill switch that I talked about with G.I. Joe Classified Articulation, it still can't stop this figure from being absolutely incredible. And I do feel like Hasbro went out of their way to make this a special event for longtime G.I. Joe collectors and people like me who absolutely love G.I. Joe and Sergeant Slaughter. With that being said, I want to thank you for watching today's video and remind you to please subscribe and like the video because it really does help us out. I would love to hear your opinions down below about this Sergeant Slaughter figure and how he compares to others that we've seen in the past. Of course, also let me know your thoughts about G.I. Joe Classified and if you are collecting the line and if you're going to be picking up this particular Sergeant Slaughter figure. And as always, God bless you and yours, and I'll see you on Fanboys Forever. Fanboy out. Maggots. Blow that maggot away.